So this is Photoshop tutorial number 7, I think. This time we are looking at using the clone tool. So I want you to go ahead and open this photo here, the one called clone, and it should look like this. So last tutorial we looked at using the healing brush tool, the spot healing brush tool, which was the one where you'd have a circle and you'd select a circle, like an area, and it would choose the pixels around that within that area to replace what it identifies as like the spot in the image that you want to get rid of. So yeah, so that was one tool, and then the other one was the healing brush tool, where I told you to, if you hold the Alt key and select part of the image, you can then take that part of the image that you've selected and take it somewhere else and blur the pixels between the two. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking, say, this part of the image and you're moving it over here, and you're not copying it, you're mixing the two layers together. That'll make sense in a second. So what I want you to do is, but what I didn't tell you is, when you're doing that technique, you need to make sure that you're doing it on a new layer, because if you don't do it on a new layer, then you're making changes to the background layer, the original photo, and if you go through and make like 100 changes and then you realize that you've made a mistake, you're just going to have to go back, undo until you finally get all the way back, and you're just going to lose all this other work that you've done along the way. So, but if you work on layers, then if you make a mistake, you do this, and then you do something else, blah blah blah, whatever. You make a mistake, you can always just get rid of the layer. So ideally, just say you wanted to edit this part of the image you do that on a new layer, then you edit this part of an image on a new layer, then this part of the image on a new layer. So you'd have all these layers. So then when you realize, oh no, I've stuffed up this area here around the water, instead of losing all this other editing that you've done, you can just delete the part around the water, because that you've got that as a separate layer. So this time round, I want you to make a new layer, and we're going to be using the clone stamp tool. So you'll see now the clone stamp tool, differently to the healing brush tool, it will take part of the image. So you hold the Alt key, choose a part of the image, and you'll take that part of the image and you'll clone it elsewhere. You'll see how this isn't working now. So you see the circle that I've currently got that's spinning around. That's where I'm meant to be painting in the part of the image that I've copied, and the cursor is the square, the cross is the part of the image that's meant to be copied. So it's trying to tell us that the footprint is being copied, and it's being copied over here to the circle. But the reason why we can't see it is because what we're actually doing is we're working on a new layer, which means if you turn off the background layer, we're copying part of the image that's transparent to another part of the image that's transparent. So we're just copying nothing to nothing, so it's not working, because we're working on the current layer. So if we go all layers, that means now theoretically I can choose this part of the image, pan it over here, and it should work. That was a pointless thing to do. Okay, so make sure you've got the point I'm trying to make is make sure you've got all layers selected. You're working on a new layer, and then you use the Alt key, you select the part of the image that you want to copy, you take it to the part of the image that you want to copy it to, and then you put it in there. Now you'll see that when I used that tool, it like copied literally copied every single pixel from that area to this area. Whereas when I use the brush tool, it will have a different sort of effect. See the difference? So when I use the clone tool, it, like I said, literally copied every single pixel individually from here and replaced it over here. Whereas this one, it copied those pixels, but then it blended them with these pixels here. So these different tools have different uses. So with the sand, for instance, if you were trying to copy these footprints to another part of the image, then using the healing brush tool might be more effective because it creates an effect where it blurs in a bit better. Let's put those two footprints there. Where was that other one? There. Let's do that for now. And then say you want to get rid of all this dotty part, so you would be using the spot healing brush to do that. And that's actually turning out a bit dodgy, so you might want to instead use the healing brush tool to selectively select parts of the image and replace them. So you'd select part of the sand that's clear and replace it on the sand that's dirty, well, dotted with stuff. So I want you to do that, is have a play with it, copying, using the healing brush tool to copy parts of this footprints to other areas, and then going through and using the healing brush again to remove some of the impurities. And then the clone stamp tool, where that can be effective, is when we're copying part of the image. So we want to, in this case, say we want to copy this person here and move them somewhere else. So you can clone stamp, hold the Alt key, select at their feet, and then we could move that person. Let's move them directly sideways so that the water stays. I don't know if that's going to work that well. Say we've put them there, right? Let's actually put them over here as well. So you're going to have to select it again using the Alt key, and let's put them over here too. So the way, see how I'm doing it? When you move, it'll show you like preview what it's going to look like where you put it. So because I've copied here, I've got lines like along the shoreline that I can use to line up where I move it along. So I'm moving it over here, and I can line up the shoreline with where the shoreline is in the original part of the image. So then when I copy it in, it doesn't look too unnatural, or there's not too much. See how the shoreline sort of stays consistent across the three images, and then all I need to do now is go back and fix up the mountain lines. So how would I do that? You can do that by, so I could either do that by selecting this part of the image. Now that's actually not what I wanted to do. I could do that by selecting this part of the image and then dragging that, see how I can see how it's lining up, and then drag that over here and then just copy it across like that. But then it's going to copy across to her. So the way to fix that is to either create a selection around her. So if you were to have a selection, and then when I go to make changes, it's going to make changes only inside that selection, or if I go Shift Control I, then it's only going to make changes outside of that selection. So you could do it that way, which is a bit tricky. Or you can also use the history brush. to zoom right in. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll make that a bit bigger. I'll zoom right in, and using the history brush, I can just paint. What it's doing is the history brush is essentially pressing undo, but painting undo. So I'm choosing what I want to undo, what changes I've made to the image that I want to undo, and I can paint those changes in essentially. Try and move this across. So we need to fix up this part as well. So I want to paint, like undo paint these parts here. Then there might be some dodginess here that we want to fix up too. We can make it look like she's standing in the water. Actually looks really bad. So I just press the undo button there to bring it back. So essentially now it's when I turn it on and off, I'm just basically cutting out parts of the image that I didn't want to clone across, which is this water stuff. So I wanted to keep all the water how it was, and I only wanted to clone her into the image. Looks like I've got a bit here too. Yeah. So this is where, if you weren't lazy like me, you'd make a selection, and you wouldn't blur that part of her skirt, because you'd have a selection that would actually stop you from coming across and copying that across. But I can't be bothered doing that right now. But when you're editing your images for your own images for the final, that's what you'll do is technical. But anyway, so I want you to do something like that. So you can see now, if you look around her legs, the one that we've just fixed up, it looks pretty natural. It just looks like her legs have been incorporated. Even the mountain doesn't look like it changes, but the sky does. So you'd need to go back here now and do some fixing up there using that history brush tool again. Oops. Oh my god. I apologize for these videos being really slow. It's because I'm using my laptop with the keypad. Yeah, so anyway, you get the idea. So now you can see that I'm really only just copying her across, and I'm not affecting the sky or the water. Again, I've come close with the brush and I've blurred her hair, so when you're doing it, you'll use selections to stop that from happening, but you get the idea. So what I want you to do is do this, try and copy the same way I've done it. Copy the girl across so that you've got her in 3 different spots. Originally copy her from the middle to the left and to the right. So you've got 2 of her, 1 on each side, and then you have to do your best to fix up the mountain using the clone tool and the history brush tool. I want you to also blur using the use the healing brush tool to copy the footprints across to here. And then I want you to finally use the clone tool to get rid of the original girl from the middle. So this would be the last step you'd do. So you'd